everyone, it's Paul, and this week I am here to tell you about the #1 biotech stock in my opinion. That's right, #1 biotech stock, and I'm going to tell you how and why and where and how long. But before we do that, gotta get to some important information. All right, disclaimer, not investment advice. That means buy, sell, win, lose, take it into consideration or not. It's on you. It's your money. It's your responsibility. I got a lot of numbers in this one. I had to actually use a worksheet and multiply. So there were some roundings that sort of like went forward. And so, if you go back and like, Paul, you missed it by one decimal place, by one number. Hey, I plead guilty. I plead guilty. I plead guilty. So the numbers are not exact. And listen, past performance is not indicative of future results. In other words, hey, anything that I say, if it's reliant on something that happened in the past, it may or may not, work out. Like that's in the nature of markets. But let's get down to it. In my opinion, in my judgment, biotech and biotechnology is the new leader of the stock market. I mean, you can see it on a day-to-day basis. And what does it mean really for me to say that, the new leader? It means that there are more investors interested in buying into this sector, this group, this industry. And if you pay attention to markets, at least, from my experience, 20, 25 years of experience, every market sort of has a leader. In other words, something that really captures sort of like the moment, people's interest. And the benefit of that is that those types of stocks tend to get bid up to higher multiples. In other words, every stock trades at some multiple of its sales, of its earnings, of its something, right? And so the leaders tend to get a premium. So there's a real benefit to figuring out what is going to be the leader and to have investments in that area. So for example, 2008 to 2015, nobody can really remember this anymore, but remember the frenzy around shale oil? I mean, everybody was crazy for these shale oil companies. And they traded for really, really, really high prices. People, because they were so interested in it, they wanted to be in. They were willing to buy up the companies, and especially the companies that led that sector. 2015 to 2022, it was technology and cloud computing. There were so many different winners, and they traded at 25 and 30 times sales at 2021. So these are two examples of groups, sectors, industries that have led in the recent past. So what drives leadership? Why do some stocks end up becoming leaders? It's usually based on something that has gone on in the industry that could have been sort of sitting in the background, but not fully recognized by the vast majority of investors, including the folks with big money. Remember, I mean, they're not that different than you and I. I mean, they still see the same information, and they're subject to the same sort of, I guess, weaknesses, preferences, biases as everybody else. And biotechnology leadership, to me, is based on really incredible, new, useful, and beneficial technology, because biotechnology affects us as a species, as people, as humans. And if you are paying attention, and over the last really 5-10 years, biotechnology has seen some really massive, like just extraordinary, astonishing, and meaningful leaps and jumps in real world usefulness, and benefit to us as users. And especially if you begin this count since 2014, just think about how many medical events that you can think about really since 2014 to 2022. I mean, obviously there's COVID, and while it's all controversial about this vaccine, et cetera, there were so many leaps that happened during COVID. the amount of testing that was done, I mean, unseen in human history. The fact that we were able to synthesize a virus within what, 12 months? Unheard of. And then figure out a vaccine in the same time frame that was widely administered to so many people. Yeah, I mean, all of that has never been seen before. And prior to that, there were any number of things that got less attention. There have really been some phenomenal, incredible near cures for cancer. And then there are also near cures for hepatitis disease. So there has just been an incredible amount of development that has unfolded. And now looking forward, what is driving people to really go and say like, hey, I really need to be into biotechnology. There's so much going on. And these are the things that, big money investors are focusing on. CRISPR. I mean, the short form for this is gene editing. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen that I retweeted something that Kathy Wood from Arc Innovation talked about, which is that someone, I believe it was in the UK, who had not responded to any medications before they used CRISPR, and she was cured of a blood cancer. I mean, absolutely astonishing. I mean, amazing, right? I mean, imagine like having no potential, no hope, and then you get this miraculous cure and the cancer has gone away. Absolutely astonishing, absolutely incredible and phenomenal. mRNA, I mean, Moderna, which developed one of the vaccines for COVID, is developing vaccines for cancer and the flu. I mean, this is going to be a big deal. Immunotherapy, this was well underway really for several years and was sort of like burbling to the top when the last biotech bull market ended in about 2014. Now we've got a number of drugs that have been approved, including one that is owned by the company that I'm going to tell you about. Then there's CAR T. This is another sort of platform technology that a lot of drugs are based on. Then there is a particular category of drugs called orphan drugs. This is a special category that is driven by a law incenting and motivating companies to pursue the development of drugs for diseases that have a very small population. I can't remember the number specifically offhand. I believe it's less than 30,000, or if I'm right, or it could be a little bit higher than that, but hey, don't troll me if I got that number wrong. It's essentially for diseases where there's just not a lot of people, and without some special incentive, it would not be economically feasible for companies really to pursue the development of these drugs. And then there is molecular testing and diagnosis, which there's so much that has unfolded where we understand particular targets within the body and understand how to sort of match that up to particular conditions, match that up to particular drugs, which is driven by, really like the mega trend, which is the use of data and information. And now through the use of artificial intelligence and machine language analysis. Very quickly, this is very busy. You don't have to follow it. You just listen to me. It's fine. I mean, data, information, and artificial intelligence and machine language, I mean, it's really revolutionizing the development of the drugs in all of those categories, because we can now use information to go through old drugs, drug libraries, as they're called, and figure out new uses and applications for these drugs, which we couldn't have done before. We've been too laborious, too expensive. Also, through the use of data and information, AI, and machine language analysis, we have better drug targets. Instead of being very general, we can be very, very specific. That leads to higher success rate, which leads to lower failure rates, which means cheaper trials, faster approvals, more people that can benefit. So lots and lots of positives. Bottom line is we have more benefits to more people and far fewer side effects, with a higher likelihood of success when you take a drug. It's not known by most people that the vast majority of existing drugs only work in 35% of people. And that standard has been good enough for really many, many decades now, still for us to improve our healthcare. But we're about to jump to a much higher standard where when you take a drug, you can have the expectation that it's actually going to work in you. And that's going to be driven by more accurate diagnosis, driven by molecular testing and analysis, based on information, and then also our genetic profiles. Many of you may have gone and taken a genetic profile test, and that can be used to match the right drug for your particular genetic code. So to state the obvious, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. So how do you capture all of this together? Many people say, well, buy the biotech ETF. And I will say, I don't know about that. Because many of those ETFs really have some of these very old stocks like Amgen and, which they're going to participate in this biotech bull market. But because they were begun in like the 1980s, and they got big, and it's just much harder to have that stock price move up as a result of big demand that comes in, and they don't just have enough of sort of the new platforms that I was telling you about, enough of those drugs in their pipeline to really make a difference. So the number one biotech stock, not yet. Just be patient. Just be patient. I'm going to tell you the name, I promise, really. In its pipeline, they've got 60 clinical stage. In other words, in testing, drugs. We've got 10 partnerships. 60, by the way, is a lot. And it's across all of those categories that I mentioned earlier. So they're really representative of the new big developments in biotechnology today. And so that's what's going to get investor interest. And so that is important. Now, this is not some tiny little company. They've been around for a while, but they also have been very active in buying new technologies, by buying up companies and staying right really at the edge of all the new, very powerful technologies out there. And they have a phenomenal, absolutely amazing track record of getting drugs approved, as well as buying companies correctly so that they didn't overpay. And when they bought the companies, those drugs that they paid for, they actually worked out. And as a result, this company's got 29 approved drugs. I can tell you, that's a lot of drugs. You may not, I've been in biotech investing for a long time, 20 plus years. 29 drugs, that's an amazing rate of success. Can I just say that, all right? So this company, it's not like a tiny company. It's well known, but, people are not really looking at it because they're looking at the fact that, it's been a biotech bear market for 7 years. This company sort of peaked out in 2014. The analysts are really not in tune with everything that is going on, this massive pipeline, their record of success, and some other details that I'm going to tell you about. They've got $6.9 billion in cash. So they're not worried about cash. Let's just put it that way. They got plenty of money to develop their pipeline. They don't need to sell shares to the public, which many small biotech and many mid-cap biotechs even have to do. They're profitable, they make money. So, this is one concern for people. And they also, as a result of either companies that they've acquired, drugs that they've been developing, they've got multiple billion-dollar drugs that have just recently launched. In other words, there's really growth catalysts that are just sitting there like coiled springs at this company. One of them is a drug for cancer called Crotalby, and that was approved by the FDA in April of 2021. And last quarter grew 78%. 78%. Yeah. And this is just getting going. Another one is a drug called Yescarta, which grew last quarter by 81%. And that was just approved last year, April 22 last year. So it's got a lot going on, a lot of catalysts. All right. And you can see, and you look at the chart, that this stock has beaten both of the most important biotech ETFs that I track. One, it has the ticker symbol XBI, and the other one is IBB. All right. Big reveal moment. What is the stock? I know. They were like, Gilead, Paul? Really? Come on. Really? Yes. Gilead. Gild. Gilead Sciences market capitalization of 108.2 billion. This is my weekly lecture about how it's important to know that. Stock price is just half of what you need to know. So many people will look at the stock price of 86 and say, Paul, this is a very expensive stock. Sorry, not true. 108 billion in the world of stocks is fairly small. Remember, Apple's still a $2 trillion stock. 2 trillion, and there's multiple other $1 trillion stocks. So in that world, it's not tiny, but it's not like massive. There's a lot of upside, especially if you buy into what I am going to lay out for Gilead for you. All right. So big reveal has happened. It's Gilead, ticker symbol GILD, and my price target over the next 3 to 5 years, do want to reinforce, not investment advice, my opinion, okay? All right, with the big reveal out of the way, let's get to why I believe that Gilead is the #1 biotech stock. In my opinion, remember, not investment advice, my price target for Gilead over the next 3 to 5 years is for it to go, say, between $250 to $500. And so that's approximately 3 times to 5 times its current stock price. Important. How will this happen, in my opinion? Well, it's going to happen as a result of 2 things. Number one, sales that go up. If you look at the pipeline that they have, just their existing pipeline, I mentioned 2 drugs that are growing at 70 and 80% that are fairly young. And in big categories where they can generate billions of dollars in sales, right? And these are benefit from many of the things that I mentioned earlier. You know, they have fewer side effects. They're more specific. There's better benefit for patients. So the upside on these drugs could be much greater than what is currently priced in. And there's not much priced in, as I'm going to tell you in a minute. So how would it happen? Well, I estimate that sales can grow between 15 to 20%. And I think that's low, but because right now people are skeptical, it's been a bear market, I'm just going to go with this number. And just full disclosure, my price targets are based on the high side number, 20%, because in my opinion, these are fairly conservative numbers. So I'm going to go with the 20% to come up with my numbers. So Gilead has $26.5 billion in sales as of the end of 2022. That's using what the current projections are. And it trades for something like 4 times sales. I believe that if it can do what I believe it can do based on its pipeline, based on its prospects, Gilead could trade for between 10 and 15 times its future sales, because it is growing. So let's do some math very, very, very quickly. All right. I keep putting Gilead up there so it's clear. A little lazy to write Gilead Sciences out every time. There's a lot of these little slides that I have to put together. So 2022 sales, 26.5 billion, making the assumption of 20% compounded annual growth rate. That's what that CAGR, if you see it on websites, that's what it stands for. Some people will be like super jargony and say CAGR, but it just means it's the growth rate compounded annually. All right. Well, if you start with 26.5 billion and you go 5 years out at 20%, you get to about $66 billion. And if you are using price to sales, remember we're at 4 times right now, of 10 going out 5 years, you get to a market capitalization of $660 billion. Hard to believe, but remember, as revenues go up and investors have confidence, they will bid the price to sales multiple up. That is very much in the nature of it, because as people come in, they say, hey, I want to own Gilead. The early birds get sort of like the cheaper valuations and you get the bigger gains. And then somewhere near the end, everyone wants in and they're willing to pay 15 or 20 or even 25 times sales. We saw that for all these cloud companies that, at the peak in 2021, they were trading for 20 or 30 times sales. So I've gone with 15 times sales. At 15 times sales at this sales, so 20% over 5 years gets to 66 billion. You get a market capitalization of $990 billion. And the gain is like an astonishing 815%. Again, my opinion, not advice. Under the more conservative target of 10 times sales, 510%. All right, quickly summarizing the #1 biotech stock presentation, Gilead. Way to the moon. Opinion, yeah, not advice, just making it clear, opinion. But I think Gilead, I think it speaks for itself. All right, but summing the whole thing up, right? $86 per share right now, $108 billion market cap, current sales of $26.5 billion in 2022, and the general price frame target price, what am I saying here? Time horizon is about 3 to 5 years. Yeah, I mean, just like everything else. But if everything I'm saying is right, they can grow at 20% a year and investors come to bid it up. Well, under the 20% price to sales of 10, we're talking about a $525 stock price. Yeah, $525. Under a scenario of 20% growth and a price to sales of 15 times, we're talking a $787 stock price, which would be 815%. So, yeah. I mean, that's what the numbers say. I'm sure there's a few mistakes in those numbers because truthfully, it was a lot to kind of keep track of. But nonetheless, the general point is this. Gilead, in my judgment, in my opinion, is going to be the #1 biotech stock of the new leadership in the stock market, which is going to be in biotech and more broadly in sort of that sector, genomics and biotech and genetics and all of these stocks, I believe, are under-owned by people. There's massive developments that have unfolded that have real world benefits to people that people can see. It's going to drive revenue growth. It's going to drive adoption. That will drive interest, that people want to own these stocks. And oftentimes it's not the littlest stocks that, that people focus on. They want something that, that big money has to be able to buy something like this. Like, I mean, they can't put $100 billion into a tiny little stock. So this Gilead is about the right size, that it can take in a lot of money. It can, as it shows sales growth driven by all of these trends, all of these sales, the multiple keeps going up. And if that's right, then those are gains in your portfolio. Now, if you like stocks like this, analysis like this, you're a growth investor. You are a BOP investor, bullish, optimistic, positive. Check into paid subscriptions at atgdigital.media, link below. You want to read a little bit more about this way of thinking, this way of investing, read my Substack for a bit. Also, link below. And if none of that is appealing to you, well, hey, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, come back again next week. This is Paul saying bye.